So I was reminded today of a funny little story that happened many decades ago. And it's interesting how these little incidents can stay with you for so long. But in the 1980s, I was fortunate enough to work in a really great guitar repair shop, guitar really restoration shop. And a few of us in there were making instruments too. I would work during the day and come back at night after dinner and work on the guitars that I was building. But during the day doing the repair work, it was a spectacular situation because everybody in the shop was really talented, and I was learning a lot from everybody. And we got a reputation for being the go-to shop in the area. So we worked for a lot of professionals, and so we had a steady stream of interesting characters of every type of interesting character come in the door. And that kept their work quite interesting too, learning how to deal with different types of people and that. So one day this guy walks in the shop, and he is a 6'4", big tall guy, camouflage shirt, camouflage pants, big tall boots, bright pink military type belt on, crazy hat. You know, he was quite the style of the day. You know, this is 1980s wild and crazy, dress, and he fit that motif. And it turns out he was a really nice guy, and he and I hit it off. I thought he was funny, and we enjoyed each other. He was about 15 years older than I was, and he always had a real pretty younger girl in his arm. So he was quite the dude. That was Billy Roberts. And Billy Roberts wrote the song Hey Joe that Hendrix made popular. And I asked Billy about that, and he said, yeah, I wrote Hey Joe, and I was able to prove it. And it turns out he got a copyright on the song and made money from the tune that Hendrix made so successful. That's a whole nother story. But so this is Billy Roberts. And when he first came to the shop, which is most of these guys, they would bring in their work guitars or their lower tier guitars, and they would check you out to see if you would do a good job. And after a while, you earn their trust, and the good stuff starts coming in. And that's probably the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. It's a smart thing. You got to make sure the person's not going to damage the instrument, etc. Well, I was at the point with Billy now that he was bringing me his handmade stuff, and he brought me a electric baritone guitar that had 6 tuners all on the side of the peg head like a Stratocaster. Excuse me, allergies. Allergies are getting me today. So 6 tuners on the side of the peg head like a Stratocaster. And what was happening was, because of the tension of those baritone strings pulling on the nut kept popping off. It would just pop off sideways. And by the time he brought it to me, you could see all this remnants of glue from other people trying to glue the nut on. And I said, well, that's the problem, is the glue, no one cleaned up after the previous person. I need to clean all that off, get it clean as a whistle, and glue that nut properly back where it should be. Clean the glue off the nut. And I said, what I like to do is not use all that junk. What I like to use is a thick super glue, just a couple of drops. It'll stick it to the end of the fingerboard. And in the future, if it cracks or it chips or you need to replace the nut, you take a little block of wood and you knock it and it just pops right out and you make another one. A nut on a guitar is like tires on a car. It's just an item. It doesn't wear quickly. You can go years without having to do anything to it. But eventually, you're going to have to do something with that nut. Most people do, especially a baritone with those thick strings dragging over the nut. So, okay, great. He leaves the guitar. I do the job. He picks it up. A couple of days later, he comes back. It had popped off again. So I said, well, Billy, the way it looks to me is that what I'm fighting is engineering and physics. It's the only thing I can think of do is clean all that off again, and this time epoxy that sucker in there, and it ain't coming off. The only downside to that is in the future, if you need or when you need to work on the nut, you're going to have to chisel it off, or I'm going to have to chisel it off, and it's going to be a lot more work. But I don't see another way to actually secure that nut in place. This has been bothering me for a long time. He goes, I'm with you. I said, I agree with that, so you go ahead and do that. So I did. He comes back to pick it up, and before he came back to pick it up, I did a good job, and it looked right, and it was done. Another guy who worked in the shop, it was actually his shop at that point, was this guy named Devon Bogue, and Devon was one of the best craftsmen I had ever met up to that point. In fact, to this day, he rivals anybody's work I've ever seen. He was just really good with his hands. And Devon had a good sense of humor. It was a very dry, laid-back sense of humor. And he was telling me about some of the practical jokes he had played on some different customers over the years. And he was encouraging me to do something with Billy's guitar. And I, of course, didn't take much encouragement. I'm like, great, let's do this. This will be fun. So here's what I thought of and what I did, which was I took a nail and put it in the vise and I hit it with a hammer. First of all, I selected the right finishing nail. It wasn't just any nail. I found an old rusty nail, put it in the vise, took a hammer, hit it with the top of the hammer so it looks like the nail had been hit. So the top of it is splayed out a little bit and bent a little bit. I take that nail, cut it in half, take the bottom of the nail, file it flat, flip it over, put a drop of super glue on the bottom of it, and put it on the nut and beat the hemming clamp and sit there and wait for it to dry. So now the nail is sticking out of the nut between the G and the D string, and I take a razor blade and clean out all the glue squeeze out from the bottom of the nut. I take a little pencil and I draw a little crack line in the nut. So what it looks like, I did a good job. And what it looks like is that I had taken a nail and had hammered the nut in place with a nail. So I have it all set up for him. It's hanging on the shop. I'm waiting for him to come get it. He's going to come pick it up tomorrow afternoon. So as I'm working on other people's guitars and doing all this other work, I'm really, in the back of my mind, I'm waiting for Billy to come. This is going to be hilarious. And so he shows up, and I pull the guitar down and put it on the bench for him to look at. He looks at that and immediately gets mad as hell. He grabs the guitar and he stomps out the door without the case, stomping across the parking lot to his car, just royally pissed off. And I'm running after him going, Billy, Billy, it's just a joke. I said, look, and I take the nail and just snap it off. I said, bring it back, let me clean it up for you. He just keeps on moving. He's just so pissed off. And I'm kind of stunned. I thought, this is funny, isn't it? I mean, this is pretty neat. But no. And the next day he came back without the pretty girl and without the bass. He came to get his case. And in his own way, he sort of apologized for overreacting, but really it was on me. You know, who knew that people would be super sensitive about their high-end, expensive, handmade instruments? What was I thinking?